Okay, so time for our next video. This is topic 4.2. We need to talk a little bit about something called signal transduction. Signal transduction. There are three steps to signal transduction. You do need to know all of these and understand kind of how they work. Step one for signal transduction, reception. Reception of the signal, i.e., you have a ligand, right, binding to a receptor molecule. Receptor molecule. Of course, this is kind of a model of a cell, so you can think of this as, you know, this is this. I'm drawing some little phospholipids in here to let you guys know this is supposed to be a cell membrane. Cell wall is indicated out here somewhere, but this is the plasma membrane, right? So you get phospholipids all along here, and you've got these proteins, kind of these integral proteins embedded in this phospholipid bilayer. So step one, you have reception. Ligand binds to a receptor. Step two, this is a very important part of this process, the signal transduction, in which you have some amplification of your signal. And this signal is essentially passed from molecule to molecule. It's similar to, you know, if I was to if you were to pass a note in class, right? And each time you pass that note, you passed it to you know, three people, and those three people passed them to three people. This is kind of how this process works. These secondary messengers work. They help to amplify the signal, and of course, you need an amplified signal because that's how everything in the body works. It's all a concentration game. How concentrated is your signal? The third aspect of transduction, the third step in signal transduction, is a response. Your cell is going to have some sort of response. This can, you know, something like make a protein, right? Make a protein. That's something that could do to respond. That's just one example. There's many things your body could do to respond. In some cases, your cells can even move based on this, right? Such as your white blood cells, which are moving throughout your body to kind of control infections and things like that. So there's all sorts of responses that cells could make in your body. Maybe it's divide. Do I divide? Should I divide right now? Right? This is a cellular response. This is it's what you get at the end of this, right? You receive a signal, that signal is amplified, and the cell responds in turn. Three steps, know those: reception, signal transduction, and response. Very, 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 very important. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go through how a lipid or steroid hormones work. Okay, so let's say you have cell 1 up here, right? This is cell 1. It has some sort of protein carrier which is carrying this steroid ligand right here. This is the steroid, this S. If you remember from the previous video, I want you to pause it and let me know, do you think this steroid should be able to pass through? Is it going to need a protein to help it through this plasma membrane? Okay, if you're back, you should know, and of course it doesn't indicate it visually here anyways, but a steroid does not. It is a lipid-based molecule. Remember, nonpolar molecules don't have trouble passing through this membrane. So the steroid can pass through this membrane. Keep that in mind. You have steroid hormone. Here's your blood system right here, cell 1. Okay, you have a target cell. You have your plasma membrane, cytoplasm. Let's label everything. Here's the nuclear membrane over here, right? I'll point at the nuclear membrane, and here's the nucleus. Okay, step 1. Your steroid hormone is able to diffuse across the membrane. It can diffuse across the membrane. Doesn't need any help. Step 2. It's going to bind to a receptor molecule. Again, this is different than what you saw in the last portion of this video because it's not on the outside of the membrane. The receptor molecule for this one's actually inside the cell on the cytoplasm. Step 3. This molecule there's a transduction process which occurs right here, right? So that part's kind of glossed over, but you have some transduction of this signal. It becomes a transcription factor. Transcription factor is something that binds to DNA and essentially tells the DNA, hey, I want you to make a certain protein. mRNA is produced, something which we'll talk about later. This is one of the later topics we're going to talk about. But that mRNA leaves the nucleus and gets transcribed, or translated rather, into a protein. You might remember this from freshman year, transcription. And here's that word again, transcription factor. And then translation. translation into a protein product, right? That's the final step. mRNA is read by ribosomes, and you get a protein product. That is a steroid, and in some cases, again, yes, this protein can be secreted by the cell and go somewhere else. This is a steroid hormone, and how that works. Could be for growth, could be hair, bone, muscle, gametes, or sex cells are controlled by the same process. Of course, we know that because we know testosterone, estrogen, all of those, very important molecules are lipid-based hormones. All right, let's look at adrenaline or epinephrine. So, similar process you have here. Liver cell, cytoplasm. You have a receptor protein in the cell membrane this time. This means that this ligand, right, which is right here, cannot diffuse through the membrane. Right? This comes from your adrenal gland. Step 1, epinephrine binds to a receptor. This is your signal, right? This is your signal. This is your signal reception. That's step 1. This is going to activate a GTP down here, which, as you might know, that sounds similar to ATP because it is similar. It's just a different nucleotide base, right? G instead of A. But in essence, this GTP is reduced to GDP, releasing energy and phosphorylating this G protein over here. I used that word very quickly. Let's talk about that. Phosphorylation. You're going to notice in all of these signals that get sent, there's going to be a lot of phosphates moving around. This is kind of the nature of cell signaling. Things get phosphorylated, and it causes some sort of reaction in the cell. This is, again, the usage of energy. This is why this phosphate, this GTP, ATP, and this energy that they carry. This is kind of one of the ways in which that is used. Step 3, this is going to activate an adenylyl cyclase. Step 4, ATP is going to become something called CAMP, or cyclic AMP. Cyclic AMP. I'll just write that up there so you understand. This is a very important signaling molecule, actually, cyclic AMP. You should see the root of this word. I know I'm using red, but AMP. Do you see AMP there? Does that look like anything else? It should look like ATP except for this M, which, as you might guess, means monophosphate. So this thing's losing 2 phosphates to generate this cyclic AMP. This is going to activate a protein, which is going to activate another protein, which is going to activate another protein. This is the transduction process. Let me erase this word phosphorylation. Do you know that word phosphorylation? I understand that the moving around of phosphates is very, very, very important. In fact, this cyclic AMP is highly involved in that throughout this whole process. This is transduction. So first you had your signal reception up here. You have your transduction process in which you have this cyclic AMP, which is amplifying the signal through this whole process. And glycogen, remember, this is a long chain carbohydrate, right? I'm just going to draw it as circles, is being broken down into glucose, which is easy for cells to use for very quick energy, right? And this is released to blood, so this raises your blood sugar quite drastically. Of course, this is adrenaline. This is kind of an emergency response system. This final part of glucose being released into your blood is the response, right? This is the response. This tells your body, hey, liver, cut me up some glycogen. I need energy quickly. I need it fast. I need quick energy because I need to respond to a certain situation. That's what adrenaline is kind of going to do. It's going to activate your fight or flight response. But this is kind of the basics of that pathway. This G protein is very important. This G protein is very, very important. You'll talk about that in depth in an activity we're doing in class, but don't worry about that for now, knowing the specifics of it. I do want to show you the benefits of a secondary messenger system. So, signal, reception, and you have amplification at every point right here, right? These GTPs, what it doesn't show you in that previous one, can phosphorylate multiple G proteins, right? Which are going to bind to different secondary molecules all along this pathway, right? If you'll notice that there's amplification here, there's amplification here, and then your cyclic AMP, there's an amplification process there. Then you have another amplification process with this protein kinase. Then you have more amplification with this enzyme, and then you get a ton of product, right? This is the benefit of a secondary messenger system. You get tons of amplification. This cascade multiplier, right? Every step of the way, you're kind of multiplying this. I don't want you to go out and calculate how many products you would have from this hypothetical situation here, but it would be a lot, right? Especially if you consider that this is happening each of these times over here too, right? On all of these kinases over here. Um, so it is a fast response. It amplifies very quickly. Amplification means that you get a high concentration of product very, very, very quickly, which is very important in some responses. As you saw on our previous slide, when we're talking about adrenaline, you need that glucose extremely quickly. This is how you accomplish that speed right here. Um, So the last one I want to talk about is the ion channel. This is a different type of cell signaling, but it's very similar. It's very simple. Whoops. And you'll see this a lot in nervous tissue and in your muscles. You're going to see something called an ion channel. This is simply a molecule, a protein, that is embedded in the cell membrane, and you typically have some sort of receptor, some sort of active site on this receptor molecule, which is going to accept a messenger. In many cases, anyways, when that receptor receives the correct molecules, it will open and allow stuff to pass through it. It will allow stuff to pass through it. It might be a small sodium molecule, potassium, something like that. Calcium, things like that can get through here. When it's closed, it won't allow ions through. This is very important because our body needs to maintain something called, which you probably remember, but homeostasis. So we need to keep different concentrations of things like, maybe this needs a lot of sodium out here to be maintained, and this side needs a lot of potassium to be maintained, right? So they will respond typically to some sort of messenger, which will open it up and allow these molecules to or specific molecules, to flow freely from one side of the cell membrane to another. This is called an ion channel. Okay, sorry, this video is a little bit long, but I think I'm going to leave it there for now. All right, thank you for listening.